Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, we're going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh. And we do that by Shem Mashiach Yahweh Shai. This brother Yahweh from the heirs to the kingdom Israelites. And most high willing, this will be an edifying lesson. I have an unction. I got an unction. And y'all know, if y'all watch whoever watches the channel regularly, y'all know I don't do this often. But I'll be honest with you, I got a lot to say. And I got a lot of things to bring out. But today, most high willing, we're going to go through the book of Acts, chapter 17. It's been kind of a hot button topic lately, but I'll be honest with you. I remember a few years ago, there were a lot of Christianity apologists who were bringing out verse 30, to push their narrative. And now I've seen it be brought out again recently to push the same narrative. So most high willing, this will be edifying. This is not to sway you in your mind and what you think about the chapter. I'm not, if anybody knows me, they know I'm not into precepts like that. I do have precepts, and you see me cut up many a scoffer or many even my own brothers who have an incorrect, what I perceive as an incorrect doctrine. So I'm not against debate, but I don't think that you memorizing precepts here a little bit there is what's going to get you understanding. I believe, and anybody who knows me knows that what I believe is that we got to have an understanding of what's going on in the Bible so that we can differentiate as to whether somebody is going off or whether they're on point. You feel me? So I want to focus on Paul in Athens, but we are going to breeze through the whole chapter a little bit. But I want to really focus on, I believe, about like verse 15 on down. All right. So most high willing, through the spirit and power of the most high, this will be edifying. All right. So let's go ahead and get this going. This is Acts chapter 17. Explained. Right? And I know we already did this, but I got to do it again because I got to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, B'Shem Mashiach Yahweh Shai. I don't normally want to do this, but something's inside of me telling me I got to do this. There've been some good videos and good teachings coming out. What I want to do with this is I want to spark thought, right? I want to spark a deeper dive into the Bible, right? There's been a lot of accusations about our community and that we have no scholarship and that we are basically, they think we're stupid and we're just dumb. But if you know your Bible, the Bible doesn't say I'm going to use the people that went to Harvard and Oxford to confound the street vagrants. The Bible says I will use the lowly and what they consider the foolish to confound what they call the wise, right? So without further ado, let's just get into the chapter, right? Now, Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. Let's go to the Bible. Now, I'm going to, you know what? Let's just start here. Verse 1, the Bible's amazing, right? Now, it says, now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. Now, what we're going to find is a pattern that Paul is always going to the synagogues where the Israelites are. Right? Whether they're Hellenized Israelites, they're deep into Judean culture Israelites, they're all a mixed pot that are in these synagogues, right? But let's keep reading. It says, and Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them And 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them out of the scriptures. For 3 different weeks on the Sabbath, he went to the synagogue, right? To reason with the Israelites out of the scriptures, right? And this is something I want you to keep in mind too, because what Paul is doing when he's around the Israelites, he reasons with them out of the scriptures. At least those Israelites who are familiar with who they are, what their heritage is. Now, keep in mind, there are Israelites of different levels of knowledge. Some of them know they're Israelites. They're deep in Judean customs. Some of them know they're Israelites, but they're Hellenized. They're mixing in those Greek customs with their life. Some of them are fully immersed in Greco-Roman culture and have nothing to do with a synagogue or a Sabbath, right? But he's reasoning with the Israelites out of the scriptures in the synagogue, right? And what is he doing there? He's opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preach to you is the Christ. Now, if you keep on reading, there's a big whole thing that jumps off in Thessalonica, and they try to come after Paul. They try to come after Paul's homies, but we can get into that another time. I want to make my point. Now we get to verse 10, the next stop after all this melee takes place in Thessalonica. It says the brethren immediately sent away Paul and Silas by night unto Berea, who coming thither went into the synagogue of the Jews. Again, they go to the synagogue of the Jews for several weeks, Thessalonica, forgive me, Salakia. And then even once it turns bad, some people believe, some people didn't, the next stop is Berea. And where do they go? To the synagogue of the Jews. I got to read this verses because this is what I pray for the whole community. It says those in Berea were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so. Right? Now, my next point is that when Paul goes to any city, the first stop is always to go see the Israelites. Depending on how that goes, whether it goes good or whether it goes bad, when Paul goes to another city, the next stop is the Israelites. He never says, I'm leaving this synagogue and now I'm going to go over here where they put raisins in potato salad and talk to them. He never does it, right? But I want you to see something here. Now let's get here. Verse 15. I say that to say this. Verse 15. It says, and they that conducted Paul brought him unto Athens. Now I'm reading a KJV. It says, they that conducted Paul brought him unto Athens. It means maybe that you could say like those who escorted Paul or those who were rolling with Paul brought him unto Athens. And receiving a commandment unto Silas and Timotheus for to come to him with all speed, they departed. So basically that's saying Paul shows up with his crew, but then he told his crew, hey, go get Silas and Timothy and tell them to come meet me as quick as they can. So now Paul is alone. Paul is alone in Athens, right? Next verse. Now, while Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city was wholly given to idolatry. Now, I want to make this clear. This verse is very important, right? As Paul waited in Athens, his spirit was stirred when he saw the city was wholly given to idolatry. Because in verse 30, people will try to separate one verse in verse 30 and tell you that what Paul was doing was preaching salvation for every nation, which is a lie. You have to know the Bible. You have to read that chapter. You have to understand what is going on in this chapter. Paul went and went to Athens, and it says his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city was wholly given to idolatry. Right? Now, and I want you to keep an eye on this here. Anybody who's listening, I pray that you want to get deeper into the word. You know, if you've been through this, give me some attention and just shemai for a minute and hear me out. But if you haven't been through this and you're not familiar with this, man, break out a pen and a pad and take some notes and then run it back on your own and determine whether you think where my point of view is correct or another point of view is correct. Dig deeper for yourself, okay? But this verse, we're going to be coming back to this verse, all right? His spirit was stirred up when he saw the whole city given to idolatry. Therefore, he disputed in the synagogue with the Jews. His first stop, he disputed in the synagogue with the Jews. He went to the synagogue where the Israelites are, right? Hellenized Israelites, Judean Israelites, all in the synagogue. He went to the synagogue where just there were Israelites. And he disputed with them out of the Bible, right? And with devout persons. And in the market daily with them that met him. Now, people are going to tell you, I got to show you something. People are going to tell you, oh, see, Paul, he's in the market because he's just trying to call in every nation of people to him. You got to understand something about Athens, okay? Athens, let me go ahead back out of here. Athens, where he's at, and it says the marketplace. This is the marketplace. It's called the Agora, right? This is the marketplace. You see people walking around. You see steps. You see idols everywhere. Look up top. You see idols on the hill. That's the Acropolis. All around. If you look everywhere in this image, you'll see a statue, an altar, something somewhere. Everywhere you look, you will see an idol. Now, there's something about the Agora that you need to know. There's something about the Agora that you need to know. Let's remove that. Okay. Let me show you something else. There's something in the Agora that you need to know. The Agora is famous for debate and talking and conversation and wordsmiths going back and forth, philosophers. In Athens, they're super into philosophy, right? And you'll see people like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. All these people lived in Athens, and this was their stomping grounds, and they hung around the Agora, and they talked, and they shared ideas and thoughts, and they thought they were super smart, right? This is what's going on in the Agora. Paul was not an anomaly. Let me say that again. Paul in the marketplace, talking to people about ideas, about gods, about perspectives. Paul is not an anomaly. There's a gang of fools out there doing it at the same time. You feel me? This is the atmosphere in Athens. It's what they're about. I don't know if you ever seen that little talking center, that park or whatever in England or wherever that's at, where it's like Muslims and Christians and Israelites, they all go to get together just to debate and talk, and they film it. And there's a bunch of circle of people, and they listening to people talk and conversate. It's the same thing in Athens. This is what Athens is. Athens is a bunch of people philosophizing and thinking and talking and debating and trying to get deep. All right? Now, when you look at this corner right here, this side of this, you'll see a guy named Zeno. And then you look down here, right next to him, there's a guy by the name of Epicurus, right? These two guys developed two different schools of thought, all right? Let's break that down. so you can see it. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but you know what? We're about to read it in the next verse, so we might as well make it clear. So there's these two different groups, major groups of philosophers. They're Stoics and they're Epicureans. Now, the Stoics come from Zeno. Stoa means steps or porch. So they'd be sitting on the porch talking that talk. They call them the Stoics. Stoics are more like they look about like they're all about enduring pain, right? They're like, life is going to be what it is. You got to endure the hard times and have no emotion. You know, that's their sort of way of approaching life. The Epicureans come from Epicurus, and their idea of life, just to kind of make it in a nutshell for both of them, the Epicureans are into like pleasure. How do you find comfort out of life? You go through life and you got to find a way to find comfort and peace, right? So these are the two different schools of thought. This is a school of thought. An Epicurean and a Stoic is not a nationality. It's a school of thought. And were Israelites Stoics and Epicureans? Yes, they were. Because every range of class, from the high society people all the way down to slaves, took on Stoicism or took on Epicureanism. Okay? So it's a wide range of ethnicities and classes that choose to follow Stoicism or to be an Epicurean. All right? Just to make that clear. Let's go back to the Bible. All right? Now, it says, let me read this again. Therefore, he disputed in the synagogue with the Jews and with devout persons, and in the market, that's the agora, daily with them that met him. That means passers-by, what have you. He would sit and talk with them, you know, or they're already talking. He jumps into conversation. You feel me? He's in there talking, right? Now, next verse. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him. And some said, what will this babbler say? Now, this is an insult. When they say, what will this babbler say? This word, it means like, I believe it means seed picker, right? It's a hell of an insult. There were people that used to sit around. Let me show you something, right? Let me show you something. Salakia. This is the agora. People are walking around the agora. They're selling things. They are, talking. They're teaching. All kinds of stuff is going on in the agora. A seed picker would be a guy who would like walk around the agora and wait for somebody to drop something. They drop, a pile of seed. He pick it up, scoop it up, and go try to sell it. You drop a hat. He pick up the hat, run away, go try to sell it, right? So he's kind of a scavenger. But it's the same thing with words. They're saying he's a scavenger with words. I believe the Greek word is like spermalogos, right? When he says babbler, it's like spermalogos, like seed, right? And logos means word. So they're saying like he's just like a guy who's just picking up random words and running off at the mouth. He just jaw-jacking. This is what they say. When they call him a babbler, this is an insult, and you got to take it as an insult. Okay, you dig what I'm saying? Now, back to the Bible. He says, "What will this babbler say?" And some, he seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods. They said he seemed to be a setter forth of strange gods. I don't know how deep I should go into this, but I guess I should go into this. Right? It says, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. See, why do they think it was gods? They said it was strange gods. Not a strange God. They thought it was multiple gods. Because the word resurrection in Greek is anastasis, which sounds like a female deity. So it sounds like Jesus and his wife, like how they got Zeus and Hera, like how they have, the male god and his wife. He's preaching Jesus and Anastasius, and they're thinking, we got dual combos going on like that. So they thought maybe he's talking about that type of thing, right? Paul is going to clarify that later on. However, I want to bring this out because he said he seemed to be a setter forth of strange gods. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, let me just tell you, the Areopagus, that means hill of Ares, right? Now, sometimes they call it Mars Hill. Mars is the Roman version of the Greek god Ares. So the Greek god Ares Hill is Mars. The Roman version of Ares is Mars. Okay, so when they say Mars Hill or Ares Hill, the Areopagus, same thing, same place, right? Now, what you got to know about the Areopagus is that some people try to imply that it's like a place where people just go and give speeches. It's actually a court. It's actually a court and a council. They dealt with homicides, they dealt with certain crimes, and they dealt with religious issues. Now, I by no means am I going to imply that Paul is on trial. Hear me. By no means am I implying that Paul is on trial here. But there is a tension in the air. Look at this. It says, and they took him. They took him and they brought him unto the Areopagus, right? This word for took, you got to do some studying. That's a little homework for you. Dig into this verse and go look in the Blue Letter or go look in your Bible Hub and go into the lexicon and see what that word is. This word means to seize, right? This doesn't mean that they invited him to Mars Hill. It says they took him and they brought him to the Areopagus, right? Now I want to show you something. Let me show you something. Let me show you something. All right. This is the hill, right? This hill here where the rocks are, that's Mars Hill. That's Areopagus. In the distance, you see that structure in the back, that's the Acropolis. It's a big it's the Pantheon is there, statues of the goddess Athena and all this other idol worship they got going on is in the distance. But those rocks that these weirdos are standing on, that's the Mars Hill, that's the Areopagus, right? Now, some people argue, there are different scholars that argue different things. Now people talk a lot about scholars and scholarship, right? People talk a lot about scholars and scholarship, right? Now I want to take this away. Let me move this here. People talk a lot about scholars and scholarship. Some scholars say that when Paul went to Mars Hill, he was actually on that hill. Other scholars say that he was in the Stoa. You see this right here on the side where they got this dual level place building with all these pillars? That's a Stoa. Some people say during Paul's reign, during Paul's lifetime, the Areopagus was meeting in the Stoa. Neither here nor there, it's still a council and a court, okay? Now, keep that in mind also about scholars. People have scholars that agree with them. I guarantee you, for every scholar that thinks the sky is blue, there's a bunch of scholars that say the sky is red. So, just because a scholar agrees with you, that means nothing. You got to go dig deeper to find what's right for yourself. So some scholars say that during Paul's time, they were meeting in the Stoa over there. Neither here nor there. The point is that they grab Paul, they seize him and take him to the council. All right? They seize him and they take him to the council. And there's something else I want to show you. Matter of fact, there's something else I want to show you. Because I don't know, a lot of people say about what's going on, and I want to show you something. I want to show you something. There's a man by the name of Socrates who lived, I believe he was born in Athens, lived in Athens, died in Athens. When I pulled up that slide of all those different philosophers, Socrates is one of them. Plato, which is a famous philosopher, learned a lot from Socrates, quoted Socrates a lot, right? Socrates was sentenced to death in Athens. And what for? What were his charges? Now, this trial takes place maybe 400 years before Paul is there in Athens at this point that we're reading. But look at what happened to Socrates in Athens. He was sentenced to death for what? He was charged with two things. He was charged with impiety and corrupting the youth. What is impiety? Impiety is not acknowledging the city's gods. Socrates was charged with not acknowledging the city's gods. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. I believe they made him drink poison, hemlock, like a poison called hemlock, right? So I want you to understand what's going on here. In Athens, they take these Greek gods very seriously in Athens. Socrates, born in Athens, raised in Athens, lived in Athens, philosopher, they love him, sentenced him to death for not acknowledging the gods of the city. It's something you just got to know. It's something you just got to know. Back to the Bible, right? Back to the Bible. And let's go back to verse 18, because maybe you can read this with fresher eyes. It says, then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and the Stoics encountered him. They're debating. They're going back and forth with Paul. Some said, what will this babbler say? They're insulting him. Some think he ain't talking about nothing, bro. You know what I mean? Others said, well, he seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. So what do? They seized him. They grabbed him, took him, brought him to the council. Right? Took him to Mars Hill. Saying, may we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speaketh is? Now, you're going to some people try to take this because it's this old school English. Well, they're just inquiring. They're just curious. No, this is definitely some pressure on this. You dig? I just showed you what happened to Socrates. This is like when the police grab you and pull you away from the crowd, surround you, and start asking you questions. So let us know what was you doing here? What are you even doing here? You know how, depending on what answer you give, you might end up in cuffs in the back of a squad car. If you give the right answer, they may just be like, all right, let him go. Right? So there's definitely pressure with this question. Right? Let's keep going. It says, for thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We would know, therefore, what these things mean. What are you talking about, bro? I told you again, the Areopagus, they're a council that deals with homicides. They deal with murder cases. They deal with crimes and religious issues within the city. All right? And it says, for all the Athenians and strangers, right, which were there, spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. This is what they were about in Athens. They're about philosophy, sharing these ideas, debating. This is what they're about, right? However, they are about their gods. They're Athenians because they selected the goddess Athena to represent that city. And everywhere you go, you see images of the Athena, right? So they spent their time in nothing else but to either tell or to hear some new thing. Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill, which is the Areopagus, and he said, "Ye men of Athens." Now, I do want to make it clear. I just broke down something to you about Socrates. When Socrates was on trial for not recognizing the city's gods, he opened his speech the same way. Ye men of Athens. It's just a nice little coincidence. I just want to throw that in there, right? He said, "I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious." What does this mean? Is he talking crazy to him? What is Paul doing? Is Paul saying y'all got a rabbit's foot, bro? What is he saying? They're superstitious. Y'all don't cross. When a black cat crosses the alley, you don't cross the street. What is that? Step on a crack, break your mama's back. What is he talking about? He's trying to give them a compliment. He's saying, hey, I see you guys are real spiritual. You guys are real religious. You guys care about these deeper things. This is what he's trying to do. He's trying to relate to him. You feel me? Paul got a mouthpiece, in case you ain't know. He said, "For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription." Now check us out. We just read in verse 16? That Paul got irritated because of all these damn idols. He didn't tell them, hey, as I passed by all your idols, I was sick to my stomach. I was sick to my stomach, fam. He didn't say, as I walked by your altars, I was like, y'all some dummies, bro. I was like, y'all out of y'all mind. No, he said, for as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore you ignorantly worship, him I declare unto you. Now check this out. I got to show you something else. Let me show you something else. Let me show you something. Right? Let me show you something else. Okay? Because he's talking about this altar to the unknown God. Right? Now, as far as in the city of Athens, archaeology hasn't yet found an altar to the unknown gods, right? But here's two that they found. This first one that you see in the grass there, that one was found in Asia Minor. I think it was found in Pergamum, right? And it's an altar that says, to the unknown gods, right? The one on the right, that one, I believe, was found in some Roman province, right? And it's an altar and it says, to the unknown gods, right? So what it is while Paul was walking through the Agora, he saw one altar that said, this is for the unknown God. You know what I mean? They were super on trying to cover all their bases. They're like, we got this guy for this. Like, let me tell you, they named the city Athens, right? They named the city Athens for Athena, right? But there was a debate. It was between Athena or Poseidon, okay? And they chose Athena. But after, let me show you this. Let me see this. The Acropolis. Now, this is the Acropolis. That statue right there, that is Athena, right? So Athens is named for this god. But before they named the city Athens, it was between Athena and Poseidon. And their mythical story goes that it was between Poseidon and Athena, and they were both vying for who's going to run the city. And Athena brought forth an olive branch, and everybody was like, oh, she's dope. We rolling with Athena. So everybody rolled with Athena. but they didn't want to upset Poseidon. So they still made an altar for Poseidon over there by the water. You feel me? This is the way they were. They didn't want to upset all the gods. So they were like, listen. So Paul's walking through the agora and he sees an altar for the unknown gods. And then he brings it out to tell them about it, right? So check this out. Back to the Bible. He says, for as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore you ignorantly worship. He says, there's a God out there that you guys don't even know who he is. You ignorantly worship. You don't know nothing about him. Him I declare unto you. This is what I'm here to talk to you about. So Paul done got in there like in a smooth way. Paul was like, whoa, you know what I mean? He's standing in front of this council and he's like, listen, bro, you know, I saw there was an altar. You guys, hey, I see you guys doing your thing over here with your philosophy and stuff. Hey, I saw there was an altar that said the unknown God. That's the one that I'm here to talk to you about. You know what I mean? I ain't talking nothing crazy. I'm just talking about the one that you said you didn't know about. I'm here to tell you about him. Right? Verse 24. The God that made the world and all the things therein, seeing that he is the Lord of heavens and earth, he dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Now, Paul is trying to like cut him now, right? Now Paul is like, you know, risking a little something. He's telling him, listen here, you got a God of the sea, Poseidon. You got a God of war, Athena. You got a God of this or a God of that, God of this or that. But the God I'm telling you about made everything. The Most High God made everything that's on this earth, right? He is the Lord of the heaven and earth, right? And he don't dwell in temples made with hands. He's sitting there telling them he don't dwell in temples made with hands. They sitting right there. And there's idols everywhere around them. And the Acropolis is right there, right? It says, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth all life and breath and all things. I got to show you this because this statue is like 30 feet tall. It's actually more than that, but they say it's like 30 something feet tall, right? This is a very big altar. You know, if you go on behind that statue, you see that building back there. That's the Parthenon, right? And it's got a bunch of different deities up in there, and they got another statue of Athena inside there, right? And there's just idols everywhere. He's telling them your idols, the Most High who created everything, he ain't in none of these idols and temples. You dig me? He's not in none of these idols and temples. And forgive me, I'm not here to offend anybody, but I'm gonna break this Bible down, and I pray that it may spark you to go deeper into your studies. But I'm not here to say I'm right or wrong. I'm here to talk about what's going on in this chapter. You feel me? Back to the Bible. Back to the Bible. It says, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life. Everything is from him. And breath and all things. Now this is a big verse right here. And hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. So this is saying that they like to take this verse. Let me see. They like to take this verse and make it seem like what's going on is Paul is saying we're all equal. It's not about any different nationalities or what have you. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is Paul is saying the Most High God is in above everything. everything you see, the Most High God is in control of it. It's not saying, hey, we're all equal. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is the Most High God is above us all, right? That's really what it's saying. Now, what does it mean when it says the times appointed, right? See there, it says, he hath determined the times before appointed. What this means is that the Most High God, I just realized I forgot something I wanted to show y'all, but it's all right. Now, what the Romans did is the Romans, when they conquered any area, they would pray to the gods of that area. I don't want to get into a whole divine council breakdown, right? I don't want to get into a whole divine council breakdown, but they were full believers, right? That different gods ran different areas, right? So when they would go into different areas, they would pray to those gods and say, let us roll with you, and we'll make you a bigger place than these people made, right? We'll make you a bigger altar. We'll make you a bigger everything, right? Come with us. In Rome, whatever god you are, we'll make a god for you. We'll make you a place. We'll make you a place in our land. Look at this. I shouldn't even do this, but I'm gonna do this. I had a dope one of I had a dope image that I don't have time to show you right now or find it, but it was the Romans bowing down to Egyptian gods, right? But this is what they would do. Once they conquered an area, they would want to follow their gods as well and grab their gods and tell their gods, come on, be a part of us, right? This is what they did. This is just what they did, okay? Now, how do I say this? Okay, so in doing so, they were under the impression that if they won the war, their God was stronger. Okay? I say all that to say this. They were under the impression that if they win the war, it's because their God is stronger. But what Paul is telling them is that there's one Most High God who's in control of all of this. And he's the one who determines whether or not you win the war or not. So when it says here in the Bible, it says he hath made of one blood all nations. It says out of one man came all these nations, right? To dwell on the face of the earth. And he hath determined the times before appointed. That means that when whoever wins the war, whoever spreads out their empire, whoever wins, whoever loses, it's all determined by the Most High. It's not because your little Athena god. It's not because of Poseidon. It's not because of what Mercury or Zeus. It's because the Most High determined for that to happen. It says, and the bounds of their habitation. This is a sort of a loose way of repeating what's said in Deuteronomy 32:8, right? To get into like a divine council thing, but it's not a direct quote. You have to deal with when it says that he determined the times before appointed. So this is what Paul is saying. Paul is saying, when you guys win your wars and did your thing, it ain't because of these little idols you got. It's because the Most High did all that, right? It says that they should seek the Lord, and happily if they feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. Look at what's going on here. I want to show you something else. Paul went through the same thing in Acts 14 when he healed that man And a big crowd came, which is like mixed Israelites and non-Israelites. They started calling them Greek gods. Look at this. Verse 12, Acts 14 and 12. And so he healed a guy, right? Look at this. And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, the gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. And they called Barnabas Jupiter. Jupiter is the name, is the man Zeus, right? It's their god, is God Zeus. And Paul, Mercurius, that's the god that they would call Hermes. So what the Greeks call Hermes and Zeus, Romans call Jupiter and Mercurius. You dig? Just like I told you, the Romans, when they defeat a people, they take on their gods. Jupiter is the Roman way of saying Zeus. Mercurius is the Roman way of saying Hermes. And Hermes was like the one who was the talking one. So when Paul's sitting there doing all the talking, they're like, oh, Barnabas must be Zeus. Paul must be Hermes. Because he was the chief speaker, right? Now, look at what Paul says, right? They start trying to offer sacrifices unto these guys, right? They start trying to offer sacrifices unto Paul and Barnabas, and they're like, whoa, you are tripping. You are tripping. And then he says, now look what he says about the Most High. Because now we got a mixed crowd here. And they were saying, sirs, why do you do these things? We are also men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that you should turn from these vanities unto the living God. He's saying, we're telling you that your idols ain't nothing, bro. You got to go to the Most High God, which made heaven and earth and the sea and all things that are therein. It's the same thing he was telling them in Athens. The Most High God is the one who made everything around you. It says, who in past times suffered all nations to walk in their own ways. God set every nation to have their own gods and gave Israel. He said, I'm going to deal directly with Israel. Nonetheless, he left not himself without a witness, in that he did good and gave us rain from heaven, fruitful seasons, and filling our hearts with food and gladness, right? Now, he's telling them, look, even though you didn't notice, there was one Most High God who gave you everything you had. And even though he let you worship all this other stuff, and he ain't tripping on you because you worship all that other stuff, you should still see that he exists, because he giving you rain and fruit from trees and all this good gladness that you should have about life. You feel me? So anyway, this is how Paul gets down when he talks to this mixed crowds. You feel me? Right? When he talks to these mixed crowds that have Israelites and non-Israelites around, he goes to the basics, right? He goes to the basics, right? So when he's talking to Israelites, he's like, look, I'm going to open up the scriptures. I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to go to Psalms. I'm going to go to Genesis. I'm going to go to Samuel. I'm going to go to David. And I'm going to show you where Christ is in the scriptures. But he's not dealing with people in the synagogue who know what's happening. So he gives them this basic breakdown. The one who created the rain, the one who created the ocean, the one who created the sea, that's who I'm talking about, right? And you should know it, because you see the fruit growing on them trees, right? And then check this out. It says, for in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Now, here is where Paul is trying to relate as well, right? Paul is trying to relate. What Paul is doing here, he's quoting their philosophers, right? Let me show you. He's quoting two different philosophers. First, he's quoting Epimenides. Epimenides, right? And this is a poem about Zeus. It says, they fashioned a tomb for you, holy and high one. Cretans always, wait, he's talking about, wait. He says, for in you we live and move and have our being. This is a quote from, if you look in Corinthians, when he's talking about the Cretans, and he says the Cretans are all liars. Right, he's quoting him there. But then he's quoting Epimenides there. So Paul did this a lot. Paul quoted their Greek philosophers a lot. This is in 1 Corinthians. He quotes Epimenides. For in you we live and move and have our being. And then he quotes this same poem about Zeus. He quotes it in Acts 17. For in him we live and move and have our being. Right? He quotes the same thing in Acts 17 that he quotes in 1 Corinthians. Paul is just nice like that. He knows these philosophers. He knows how they get down. Now, the second half of this verse, he's quoting Aratus. And it's also a poem about Zeus, right? From Zeus, let us begin, whom we mortals never leave unnamed. Full of Zeus are all streets and all gathering places of men, and full are the sea and the harbors. Everywhere we have all need of Zeus, for we are also his offspring. Now, am I saying that Paul is worshiping idols? No. Paul is trying to relate. Paul is trying to relate. So the first half of this verse, verse 28, is Epimenides. The second half of this verse, for we are also his offspring, is Aratus. Both poems that he's quoting are about Zeus, but Paul does not worship Zeus. He's just trying to use what they know to lead them to what he's saying. Just like he said, hey, I found that altar of the unknown God, right? Paul's being clever. Paul's a smart guy. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold, silver, stone, graven by art and man's device. Godhead just means divine. His divinity is not about gold, silver, or idols graven by art of a man's device. It says, and in the times of this ignorance, God winked at, but now commanding all men everywhere to repent. Now, this is where they'll say, oh, he's saying that everybody needs to come to Christ and everybody needs to be at the synagogue next week. That's not what Paul is doing. If you go back to the beginning of this, Paul was just fired up because they just saw all these idols. In verse 16, it says he waited for them in Athens. His spirit was stirred in him when he saw all these idols. Man, one year we went to Philly to do a unity camp with the servants. Shout out to the servants and the saints and AOC. Shout out to all the mighty brothers. As we're leaving the camp, we walk by a big window that has, you know, Caesar Borgia all in the window, right? Nativity scenes and everything. And, you know, it kind of, we sat there and talked about it for a minute. We sat there in front of it and was clowning it for a minute because it stirred something in us. This is why Paul is here. Paul didn't say, I want to go up to the Areopagus and talk. Paul didn't say, hey, I want to go to the Areopagus and talk. You feel me? What happened was they took him and they brought him up there, right? Paul was fine just going to the synagogue with the Jews and then just having conversations in the agora, right? What Paul is saying is, well, check this out. Let's go back to this verse 30. Look at verse 30. What word does it start with? It starts with and, right? Verse 31 starts with because. Verse 29 starts with for as much. 18, for. Now, these words that you're seeing are, I believe they're called a conjunction. That means they go along with what was said before it. You feel me? And what is Paul talking about? Paul is talking about these idols, this gold, this silver, this stone, this graven art. You guys are all into idolatry and you need to shake that off. Why do you need to shake that off? Verse 31, because he hath appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, talking about Christ, whereof he hath given assurance to all men that he hath raised him from the dead. So he's saying, y'all gotta repent. You could repent. Let me tell you something. I could make up my mind to go to the store, and I could repent from going to the store and change my mind and turn back. He's not saying you guys need to come and go to the synagogue next week. What he's saying is y'all need to get off these idols, because there's going to be a day of judgment, and you're going to have to face the Most High God. This is a new concept for them. This is another time where Paul is jumping off that stoa, letting them know something. They don't know this concept. Epicureans don't believe in an afterlife. They have no concept of an afterlife. They live in YOLO spirit. The Stoics have a weird type of way of looking at the future, right? So their eschatology is like, oh, you endure pain in the world, then the world burns up, and then it'll begin all over again, right? They don't have an idea of eschatology that Paul's talking about. This judgment at the end of the matter of fact, the Areopagus, Mars Hill, if you look at their myths about how it all began, Apollo gave a speech. One of their other gods gave a speech on Mars Hill, the Areopagus, and he said, because it's a homicide court, and it was in the same day Paul was there. It was a homicide court, and Apollo said, when a man's blood has been shed on the ground, there is no resurrection. I mean, there is no resurrection. You feel me? That's something Apollo said. So they were like, bro, they knew for sure there ain't no afterlife. Ain't nobody coming back after this. But Paul is telling them, no, we're gonna all be resurrected, and we're gonna all have to face judgment. This is a new concept for them, right? And it's laughable to them. It says, and when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, and others said, well, we'll hear again this matter. So Paul departed from among them. He got laughed at with the idea. See, he was kind of working their philosophers. He was kind of working that unknown God's altar. But when he got to the resurrection of the dead, he made it clear it wasn't Jesus and Anastasius, that it's actually coming back to life after you've been killed. They're like, bro, you talking some, man, up out of here with that. So he got laughed at. He got mocked. And then others were like, the guy's kind of interesting. We'll listen to him again if he comes back. Ain't no hard feelings. He said what he said, and we ain't mad at him for it. Right? It says, so Paul departed from amongst them. Howbeit certain men clave unto him and believed, among which was Dionysius the Areopagite. Now this guy, he's an Areopagite. That means he's part of this council. Right? It says, and a woman named Damaris and others with him. So there was a handful of people that were like, bro, I hear what you're saying. Now, whether Dionysius is an Israelite or not is up for debate. I would lean more towards him being an Israelite as part of this council, because what incentive does a non-Israelite have to convert to what Paul is talking about right now? All he did was quote their own philosophers. All he did was talk about their own altars. Paul didn't go into the scriptures and break down the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So what did he present besides he presented their own information? Why would they want to convert to what Paul's talking about? Anyone who would want to believe, which is this small handful of people, I would lean more towards, the scholars will debate on who these people are, but I would lean personally towards this being an Israelite. Because what incentive does a non-Israelite have to convert to what Paul is talking about when Paul just quoted Greek philosophers? Aratus is a Stoic philosopher, and he quoted their unknown God's altar, right? But neither here nor there. This is for you to take time and think. Look into this chapter. Read the chapter. Do the history. Understand what's going on. Understand the context. I'll tell you now, if you end up in a debate about what was the nationality of the people on Mars Hill, you've already slipped into someone's trick bag. because that's not what's going on here. Paul's not there because he wanted to preach the gospel to everyone in Athens. He's there because he got irritated with all their idols, spoke in the agora, was seized, grabbed, and taken to a council, a court, to justify what he was talking about, right? And Paul was smooth with it and got up out of there unscathed. You dig what I'm talking about? So, I would appreciate hearing what somebody thinks about it. Hit me up in the comments, shoot me an email. We can talk privately or publicly about it. You feel me? I got much more to do. Next week, I'm not sure if I'm going to deal with Acts 15, but I got to deal with Acts 15, Acts 24, Acts 26, 1 Timothy 2. We got a lot to get into, but from here, this is Acts 17. I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate hearing anything. So if you disagree, you agree, let me know. Holler at me. A lot of y'all don't like to leave comments, and you email me because you want to have conversations privately, and I ain't mad at you. You feel me? Because I'll have those conversations with you. I just hope that through the spirit and power of the Most High, this was somewhat edifying. And I just want to say all praise and glory goes to the Most High, and Shalom.